Hi guys, I'm Owen, this is Jan. We work in the marketing analytics team here at Farfetch. A lot of the work that we do is around evaluating the effectiveness of marketing spend. One of the tools that we use to do this is a type of experimentation called incrementality testing. We thought it would be an interesting topic for a talk as in our experience, analysts and product people are quite familiar with A/B tests and their application, but less so incrementality tests.
Hi everyone. So before we begin, we thought we'd start by conducting a little survey. So by way of a show of hands, how familiar are you with incrementality testing? A, my company currently uses it to measure marketing effectiveness. Sparse. B, you're familiar. C, isn't that just A/B testing? And D, not at all. Great. Owen, what do you think?
Not at all, definitely, yeah.
I think that means we can get away with talking a whole load of crap today. So, let us consider the question, are we making the most of our marketing spend? To answer this, let's start with some basics as to why we want to use incrementality testing. We are Farfetch, an online luxury retail marketplace, and we want to drive customers to our platform through any device and through the many marketing channels they exist. Now, these marketing channels come at some cost, but we know they generate revenue for us. Or do we? Well, to answer this, we need an accurate read of ROI to help us make the best capital allocation decisions. The most common way of measuring ROI of a channel is through attribution, but is it the most accurate? Does it tell us the causal link between marketing spend and revenue? Let us take an example of an individual customer journey. Now, imagine I'm the lady in the blue dress. Well, it could be Owen, actually, he's wearing blue. During my lunch, I'm browsing the web, and I search for Farfetch. I click on a paid search ad and I'm taken to the Farfetch website, where after browsing, I leave. Later on that evening, I'm scrolling through my social media and I click a paid social ad. I'm then taken to the Farfetch website where I then proceed to to buy this lovely striped top. Now, the key question here from Farfetch's point of view is, did my digital marketing efforts actually help me generate more revenue? According to a last touch model, the transaction would be attributed to paid social and I could calculate the channel's ROI. In a first touch attribution model, I could calculate the ROI for paid search. There is also a multi-touch cross-device attribution model where both channels could get attributed for the transaction. However, this is notoriously difficult to implement and even trickier to validate. However, the attribution model still don't answer the question of causal effect. Using paid social as an example, what would have happened if this ad wasn't shown? What effect did it have on the customer's propensity to purchase? More specifically, what was the incremental effect of the ad? Because attribution isn't telling us the causal effect on the purchase, any estimates of revenue generated through the channel aren't truly accurate. Therefore, we're unable to get an accurate read of ROI, which is key when we make our capital allocation decisions. One way we can resolve this is through an experimentation called incrementality testing.
Okay, so what is incrementality testing? So incrementality tests are a type of experimentation that measures the causal effect of ad exposure. So they're similar in methodology to an A/B test, but there are some important differences both in terms of the nuances of the test design, but also in terms of how decisions are made using the outcomes. So you start out with a target audience, So these are people you want to show your ads to. And after we've stated some hypotheses, decided our metrics, and done a power analysis, we sample these into test and control groups. The test group are eligible to be exposed to ads, and the control group are unexposed. We track the user's behavior throughout the duration of the test, and if we find a statistically significant difference, the magnitude of this difference can be used to calculate some incremental metrics, which can be used for marketing decisions. So there are two key differences here to an A/B test. Incrementality tests have some of their own unique challenges when it comes to sampling, and also the way in which we use the outcome to make decisions. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll quickly run through how sampling is done in A/B testing and why it's so important. So random sampling A/B tests use random sampling, and it ensures that we have balanced test and control groups. So as a user visits your site or your app, you randomly sample them into test or control, and then they'll be exposed to a different variant. This randomization ensures that you balance the characteristics of users across the groups. So in this example here, we've got people with striped t-shirts and plain t-shirts. Now, let's say people with striped t-shirts have a higher propensity to purchase. If we have an imbalance here, this is going to affect the outcome of our experiment, or likely to affect the outcome of our experiment. So let's say we ran an A/B test here, and unfortunately you can't see the result, but if there was a 52% lift, we could be fairly confident that this wasn't caused by the type of t-shirt that these people are wearing, as we've achieved this balanced groups. Incrementality tests have some unique challenges when it comes to sampling because of the type of independent variable that we're manipulating. So in an A/B test, your independent variable is the test variant or control variant. In incrementality, it's ad exposure, which is something that we don't have complete control over as ads are bought in an auction. So we can't guarantee that someone's going to be exposed to an ad. What this means is that if we randomly sample our target audience into test and control groups, some of the people in our test group are likely to be unexposed to ads. Also, because bidding algorithms are often looking for people with higher propensity to purchase, this is actually quite likely to lead to some sampling bias here. So in this example, if we compare our test group to, our exposed users in our test group to our control group, we've got more people with striped t-shirts in our test exposed group than we do in our control group. So this could affect the outcome and is actually likely to cause us to overestimate the effect that our ads are having. So what's the alternative to this then? Should we just compare everyone in our test group to everyone in our control group? We've randomly sampled these groups, so they should be balanced. So this should have controlled for the effect of t-shirt type here. The challenge with this is that this will increase the noise. It was likely to increase the noise in our result. So we've diluted our test group with people who are unexposed. So this will make it harder for us to detect an effect of our ads, especially if this group is quite large. And the size of this group will vary depending on the amount of media spend that we have. And so it also means that if we do detect an effect, this might not be a kind of an accurate estimate of the true causal effect that our ads are having. So what's the solution to this then? Should we compare, what if we could compare the test exposed group, so people in our test group who saw ads, to people in the control group who would have seen ads if they'd been in the test group? This is called the counterfactual exposed, and it's what a lot of incrementality testing or platforms that offer incrementality testing are trying to achieve. So this both minimizes the noise in your result whilst also reducing sampling bias if you're using a robust method to do this. And so this will then give us a clearer picture of the true causal effect that our ads are having. So one example of how this is done is by Facebook. So Facebook will, when you launch a test, will randomly assign everyone on their platform into a test and control group. but then they only include people in the test who won an ad or an ad impression at the auction. The only difference between your test group and your control group is that in your test group, they see your ad. In the control group, they see the second ad in the auction. So the ad that the user would have seen had your campaigns not been running. So there are other vendors have other methodologies. I think there's ghost bidding as well. So we've got our observed result. So how do we then use this to make decisions? There are various possible outcomes to an incrementality test. So unlike in an A/B test, when you're generally deciding between A and B and test and control variance, there are multiple decisions you can make from the result of an incrementality test. So you start out by figuring out whether this is statistically significant or not. If it isn't, and so your chance of a false positive isn't low enough, right? You then can conclude that assuming your test has enough power, you can conclude that there's no causal effect here. So you're most likely to switch off this partner or and reallocate this budget elsewhere. If your result is statistically significant, the focus now shifts to the magnitude of the effect. So this translates into the incremental ROI, or the ROI that's caused by your marketing activity. This isn't going to be an exact number, so you want to express some uncertainty with using a confidence interval. So you have like a range of incremental revenue that you can be confident was caused by your marketing campaigns. So dividing this by your marketing cost gives you your incremental ROI, which you can use to make multiple decisions. So if your incremental revenue is less than your marketing cost, then your incremental ROI is below 1. At this point, you would want to evaluate the goals of your strategy. So if the only goal is to drive short-term revenue, then you probably want to switch off this strategy and reallocate this budget elsewhere, as you're not doing this cost effectively. But if you have other goals, such as driving customers with a high lifetime value, or you're trying to drive traffic to your site or increase brand awareness, you probably want to review these metrics and maybe even run additional tests. If your incremental revenue is greater than your marketing cost, then your incremental ROI is greater than 1. So at this point, you'd then want to compare this to your other strategies or other test results to see if this is performing relatively well. So you can kind of use this as a performance metric in place of the ROI that you would have from attribution. One thing to bear in mind here is that if you're making multiple comparisons across lots of different experiments, then you might have to adjust your significance level as you're increasing your chance of a false positive. So it's just something to bear in mind. We'll hand over to Jan for some case studies.
Now, let's take some real examples of how we make this. Hello. Oh. Mic problems. Now, let's take some examples of how we make decisions using results of incrementality tests. In display, we work with many partners, and we suspected that not all activities drives incrementality due to such factors such as an overlap in inventory. For one display partner in particular, we ran a test in selected markets for existing customer remarketing campaigns. The result found no statistically significant lift for revenue for existing customers. Therefore, we decided to pause activity with the partner as they're not incremental and reallocated the capital to fund prospecting campaigns. Another example is in paid social. Here, we had two strategies to drive new customers. One would send them to the App Store and the other to the website. We wanted to evaluate which strategy was more effective. Although we expected a difference between the two, we also expected both to be incremental. When it came to the test, we used the vendor's internal lift tool, which was really useful when it came to monitoring and evaluating the results. So, when it did come to the results, there was two decisions we could make when evaluating the effectiveness of each strategy. Should we continue running, and should we adjust the amount spent? The results showed that the cost per incremental new customer was lower for web than app. However, we're running post-test analysis on the predicted LTV of new customers before making decisions on the budget shift. So now, what are some of the challenges of using incrementality testing? Well, with data privacy, it's an ever-changing landscape undergoing much evolution with things such as GDPR and ITP, sorry about that. And it makes it harder to track user behavior, which is key for testing. One alternative is to use geo or matched market testing to achieve the same inferences. Sample size makes testing even more difficult in smaller targeted campaigns, which can limit its application, and we can't assess with more granularity. There is an opportunity cost of conducting these tests of a potential loss in revenue because of having the control group, but this should be mitigated by the improved decisions that we make in capital allocation. Finally, whilst working with different vendors has many benefits, like using their expertise and in-house tools, when it comes to making decisions, there can be an inconsistency in methodology when comparing outcomes. So hopefully today you've learned why we use incrementality testing, how we use incrementality testing, and some of its challenges. And we'd like to leave you with a question: is your company making the most of its marketing spend?